telling me that you have a way to defer the tax situation there? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so the first one I was referring to is a 1031 exchange, which only applies to investment real estate. The second one I'm referring to is called a deferred sales trust.
A real eye-opener to see that there are ways that people can use the regulatory framework, if properly structured, to invest 1031 exchange dollars in things that you would not think were like kind to what they exited from. So it was very impressive. I got to say, you are the first one I've seen pull this off, and I'm pretty hesitant to believe in a lot of these kinds of things. So it's a major feat for me to say, wow, this actually really worked, and it was really cool.
1031 is a way to shelter your income when you sell the thing. The DST is a way to avoid the 1031 and not have to suffer the time penalty.
Our career and during different tax periods, we've seen, these tax avoidance, tax minimization, offshore, all these different strategies undertaken to minimize or avoid taxes. And then I can tell you that, some of them are just not worth the trouble. And so I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was skeptical. I thought, oh yeah, here we go, another one of these, right? And then they say, no, it really is different, right? So look more closely. We looked more closely. We had, honestly, 2 years of conversations. 2 years. Now we were being due diligence at the same time that we were doing due diligence, but 2 years is a long time to be, sort of flirting with the idea of and getting to know the people and getting to really understand the transaction. Yeah, long story short, we got comfortable, although we are not tax attorneys, lawyers, or estate planning attorneys, that at least, from an investment perspective, that, it made sense to sell a highly appreciated asset, get liquid, hold that in this type of a deferred or installment sale type of instrument, and then just be in a position then to do the most important thing. I'm probably stealing your next question, which is time. They say, well, you can't make more time. You can. The deferred sales trust, in a way, allows you to lengthen the investment time horizon for those assets after getting liquid, but before having to feel the tax impact. And from an investment manager's perspective, time horizon is the most important element in investing.
All right, we're back. Hey, look at that. Well, it is definitely Friday, the 23rd of September, and we're having a good day so far. For those who are trickling in, we have myself, Jake Miller, calling in from Colombia, the great country of Colombia, doing a little bit of international work down here. And we have Pierce York out on the street, man on the street in sunny California. Where are you at right now? Are you Huntington Beach?
Newport Beach.
Newport,
just a little bit south of Huntington. Yeah.
Very nice. Well, good. We had a little bit of an intro. Basically, we've in that intro video, we have several people talking about what the Deferred Sales Trust has done and can do for individuals. Essentially, we talk with individuals or people, business owners that have highly appreciated assets that would otherwise have to shop those assets up to the various taxing agencies should they sell them. What we help them do is we facilitate through the Deferred Sales Trust the means by which they can sell those assets without recognizing it as a taxable transaction this year. Brett Fierce, help us
Brett's
understand.
Brett's out on.
We should make that announcement, shouldn't we?
Yeah, Brett is at a crypto real estate conference speaking, actually.
Right. So he's got a different audience and a different crowd that he's speaking at. I believe there's going to be some recording clips of it that we'll play later. But for the here and the now, for the people that we have with us today, when individuals have a highly appreciated asset, whether it be stock, whether it be real estate, whether it be warrants on a business, let it be crypto, what have you, or should it be your business? these types of assets that you normally have to pay capital gains on, the Medicare tax, as well as state income taxes, a lot of times that can be avoided and deferred. And we utilize the deferred sales trust to help accomplish that. But Pierce, who is the deferred sales trust a good fit for? Let's talk about who it's a good fit for and who it's not.
Yeah, sure. So the deferred sales trust is a good fit for anybody having a liquidity event that wants to reinvest the proceeds, that's got a high enough tax liability to cause pain more than it's willing to go through the process of getting the deferred sales trust kind of squared away and set up. That threshold we found is $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain. That's pretty much a home run in all 50. How many states do we have? 51 or 50? 50, I don't know. All the states.
50 states.
I don't know if that counts the District of. I don't know if that counts the District of Columbia.
No.
I haven't gotten down there yet.
Now, Pierce, I'm going to do a little rapid fire questioning here.
Yep.
If I have a house that I've lived in selling for $2 million, could the deferred sales trust make sense?
Sure, it depends on how much you bought it for.
Okay. Let's say that I purchased it for $400,000.
Yes, the deferred sales trust would make sense on that.
Now, a lot of times.
And what state are you in? That'll also kind of, Florida's a little bit different than California.
Now, personal residences are interesting because there's an exemption, right? There's a married filing joint of up to 500,000 gain exclusion.
Yeah.
So again, if we want $1 million sales price, at least with $1 million gain, in order to get $1 million gain on top of the sales price here on a personal residence, we have to also subtract out that exclusion, right? So if my basis is 400, I have 500 of exclusion. Now we've got a gross sales price of 2 million, but 1.1 million of gain. And in that scenario, it still works. What if, Pierce, I want to take that same house with the 400 basis, the 500 exclusion? What if I want to take that and just go buy another house I'm going to live in? Is this an appropriate deferred sales trust opportunity?
The best answer ever, right? It depends.
Yes. Well, under a lot
there are situations, I would say there are situations where it could still be super advantageous. And then there are some situations where it won't be advantageous. And I think a lot of that is depending upon your specific goals, right? And what you're willing to kind of do. Because there are some strategies that we could kind of explore a little bit on that particular thing, depending upon where you're currently at with your basis and your mortgage, that we could, kind of play with and do some really cool things with. So
yes,
it depends.
Now, one of the big gatekeeper questions, I guess, or one of the big filtering questions we always ask clients in the very beginning is what they want to do with the proceeds. The deferred sales trust as a business trust is set up primarily so that we help individuals reinvest those assets net of attorney fees rather than net of taxes, which the difference is substantial. In fact, we were comparing this to some other strategies out there, and just a fee-to-fee comparison, the deferred sales trust ended up making a lot more sense for some of our clients.
Well, it's like in California, I think it's like a 36% difference in some cases.
Right.
37
so
maybe?
You got 20% capital gains, 3.8%, or let's just round it up to 4, Medicare Obama tax, right? And then you add on the 13.3 California tax. We're getting up there, right? But at the end of the day, if a client tells us, hey, I want to take some of the proceeds and I want to go buy that Ferrari, I want to buy that car, that doodad, as Robert Kiyosaki would call it, right? when individuals want to take this business trust that is for reinvestment purposes so that we can take the proceeds from one asset and roll it into that of another asset for reinvestment purposes, and they want to do something personal in nature with it, what do we tell them, Pierce?
Well, we tell them that
I'm throwing all these tax
personal
questions at you. This is the
personal
test.
assets, yeah, personal assets, right? If they're going to be used for personal use, it's probably best to just take the proceeds that you need for that and go buy that thing. Now, if there's a way, instead of buying one Ferrari, you buy 3 Ferraris and you decide that you're going to Turo them out and create a business around it, well, maybe there's some justification there. So it gets real interesting on some of the things you can and can't do.
Pierce is a creative thinker. He thinks out of the box and he finds a solution to somebody's needs and wants and desires, right? At the same time, from the tax aspects of it, if it's for personal use, then as Pierce mentioned, we usually just take that as a distribution, which is taxable as income to them at that moment. Case in point, had an individual who had a $20 million transaction, Pierce, substantial, right? Didn't matter what the exclusions, didn't matter what any of the other offsets could be for the sell. Very highly taxable sell. This individual wanted to use $1 million to go buy some dirt in Texas and $2 million to build a phenomenal house on that piece of dirt. The scenario here is that they had a $20 million transaction, of which 20 million flowed into the deferred sales trust, and then he took a distribution of 1 and then another distribution of 2, leaving 17 million in the trust, and he paid a taxable distribution on $3 million so that he could build his dream home. And that's okay, because this is how do you say this? We never keep people from spending their money. We help them spend it or reinvest it in the most optimized way so that for longevity purposes or for helping them have their objectives and their goals align with the appropriate uses of a deferred sales trust. That's kind of our job. And as Pierce mentioned, sometimes we can be creative. They may have that dream car in mind, but they also may have a luxury car rental business in mind, and that can work as well. In fact, we have a client in Kansas that has a limo rental business, and this client is a pretty amazing person, and he gets to drive a lot of really amazing cars, not just the limos. So you can have your cake and eat it too. For tax reasons, there has to be an appropriate business use and purpose. And of course, for reinvestments, we obviously don't want to just buy anything that's out there, but we want to make a good conscious decision as a fiduciary based on the intents of the trust and what you're trying to do and have accomplished. Pierce, let's say that a client, actually, you know what's best? Let's talk about one of our past deal stories that we helped somebody with. I know that you've got somebody here in mind that you've been helping recently, or maybe a couple people. Do you want to bring out some of their details and share with the group?
Sure. Which story do you think would be best for this situation?
There's the Palo Alto. We already talked about a personal house, so maybe not that one. Let's talk about luxury realty for a moment. In the Palo Alto, we can talk about that one, but if there's another one that would also be good to share. Your Kingdom Luxury Realty, it's your business, you're a luxury realtor. Tell me about some of the stories that you might even have there on the beach while talking to clients or potential clients. When somebody first hears from you about the deferred sales trust, what are some of their most common questions?
Oh, man. So you immediately get bombarded with a plethora of questions. And they can kind of all be summed up around the same thing, which is like, am I going to lose this money? why doesn't my CPA know about it, right? It's an objection based around fear that it's too good to be true and that this really is just some sort of scam that we're trying to pull or something like that. What happens if you just run away and go to Mexico? What happens if you get hit by a bus? Like, why doesn't any of my trusted professionals know about this? Oh, I just want to do a 1031. It's safer. Those types of objections I get a lot. And they just require, kind of getting to know us and overcoming those objections with building that rapport and that trust. So I think that's the root of a lot of it.
Interesting. Well, let's talk about some of those for a minute. You asked, or you mentioned that sometimes, hey, why doesn't my CPA or why don't some of these other professionals know about this? Let's talk about Todd Campbell and the Campbell Law Firm and what they've done over the years to protect and to keep or maintain whole this strategy. Maybe to understand a little bit what I'm trying to say there, let's talk about some of those strategies that maybe don't work all the time. And by and large, even a good strategy that is designed correctly and designed well, if we abuse that strategy by changing its features to our own liking or to a method or a way that we feel is more desirable for our chosen outcome rather than how it was originally intended or how the architect put it together, right? Then we should expect something different to happen. Maybe if I paint the picture a little bit better and I talk about baking. If I take a recipe that I know works and I go through it and I just change several different things inside of it, or maybe I only change one thing, but I changed the sugar portions and I added salt. Is what I'm trying to bake going to come out correctly?
You got a bagel instead of a donut.
You might end up with a surprise, right? Yeah. So similarly, when people do that to strategies like tax strategies, and they feel like they themselves as a chef, they know best, it may have a different outcome. And when there's so many different outcomes, it usually draws a lot more attention from the IRS or from state taxing agencies. It usually receives a lot more scrutiny. Now, what has been done with this strategy over 26 years now? 26 years, thousands of trusts created, billions of assets transacted and under management. And only 20-something times has it been reviewed or audited. And when I say reviewed, that's when the IRS or somebody says, hey, I want to take a look at a piece of this transaction. And of course, when I say audited, that could be anything from just a cursory audit or a deep dive audit where they look at everything. And out of all of those times, fortunately enough, there's lifetime audit protection. The law firm that signs off on this and that created it, they who are the architect, they who built the recipe, so to speak, they have had 100% track record. They're batting 1,000, and they have successfully withheld the integrity of this strategy for the last 26 years, in and out of court as needed. When I say court, oftentimes it doesn't come to court, but whenever there's been an audit or a question or a request for more information, very speedily they provide that. And that's what you want in any kind of strategy, especially if you're dealing with some of the largest transactions of your lifetime. You want to know and have that reliance. You want to know and have that assurance that people have your back who have been there before and have represented other clients and have won. And not only occasionally, but every single time. Anything you'd like to add there, Pierce?
I think it kind of comes down to the team that you get around you. You know, I think there's been some sort of, some people trying to kind of replicate a little bit that have not done a good job, and they don't have the skills, and they don't have the expertise and the knowledge that we do. And so, it just hasn't gone that well. And so that team, right, that all-star team that you get when you hop on board, where you get Jake Miller and you get Brett Schwartz and you get Todd Campbell and you get, just a plethora of super smart, sophisticated people that provide opportunities and kind of expand your network and your strategies. I think that's like probably one of the most valuable things that you get out of it, and it's awesome saving the tax and reinvesting the funds, but that team is something else. So I think I would just kind of add that.
Very good. I want to tell another story really fast, Pierce. It's been,
Sure.
I don't know, almost a year, coming up on a year. We helped a client. She was a very humble individual, very intelligent, very techy, worked for Google, purchased Bitcoin like 13 years ago. She put some money in there, didn't look at it for a long time, and it rode the wave. It went up there to 50, it went up there to 65, it came back down around 50, and she chose to take a little piece out. And that little piece, 5 million or so, we were able to help her with. To your point, Pierce, one of the things that a lot of people think about when we start talking to them is that they just have to pay the tax now. And this was almost like a miracle for her, that we could show her that honestly, you don't. Through this deferral vehicle, you're able to defer what you owe taxes. You're not saying, we're not eliminating taxes. We're not finding exemptions on this particular piece in this particular moment, but we are putting the power of timing back in the individual's hands with the deferred sales trust. And because of that, she was able to take the money out and invest in a joint venture with a dear colleague and friend of hers, as well as put some money away in the market and pull from that a livelihood every month. And then, of course, she kind of decided that she didn't have to work for Google anymore.
Yeah, no, that's it's pretty awesome.
Well, good.
Kind of with that, a lot of people I feel like are kind of in that situation where they don't know about some of these alternative, tax situations. I'm actually outside of a house right now, this house right here, on the beach, on the boardwalk. It was purchased in 1995 for 1.1 million. It needs a little bit of work, but it's going on the market for about 6 right now. And it's not even on the market. It's already got a full price offer. So it'll probably go for around 6.5, 7, possibly 7.5, depending upon if they get into, a bidding war on this thing or whatnot.
So tell us again the price it was purchased for, Pierce.
So 1.1 million. It's not a primary home. So they do have options with this one, right? They could do a 1031 exchange. They could, they could do a deferred sales trust. They're not going to get their 121 exclusion, but that's okay. Because there's other options, better options. And so, it's one of those things where there's people who I personally know who are interested in buying it. And we're going to try and leverage the deferred sales trust as a way to just make the offer way more appealing.
Right.
Because if we can save them 1.2 to, you know, $1.5 million in tax, depending upon how much work they've actually put into it and that type of thing, right? Well, that's a pretty enticing offer. It's a pretty competitive advantage. So that's kind of a little case study when you said man on the street and you know they don't know about these things, and it's kind of how you can leverage this thing to, you know, get ahead.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a real world example of what we're going to be doing here in the next couple of days, as far as, you know, trying to actually put this into a practical use and using it instead of just in theory, right?
Yeah, and if I were to sum that up just real fast, I'd say that in the competitive nature of the people that want to buy this house, there might be a little bit of a price, it might keep going up and up and up, but what other value can you come to the table with? And you're able to bring with your clients who are wanting to purchase the house, you're able to come to them with a strategy by which they don't have to pay taxes. They're able to sell the home and receive the proceeds into the deferred sales trust and reinvest it in other things based on their needs and their objectives. And it doesn't have to necessarily be real estate right away. That's perhaps one of the biggest hurdles. One of the two is in individuals that, as we talk to a lot of realtors, as they're trying to list a property, the owners of the property sometimes don't want to sell because the timing might be right to sell, but it's not right to pay taxes. So if they don't have to pay the taxes, that makes it a lot easier to list the home and to sell it. And then number two, a lot of times they're thinking in their mind, well, the only way I can get out of not paying taxes is if I do a 1031 exchange. And in a lot of scenarios, that's right. Or in scenarios where they've actually lived in the home, they're ineligible for 1031. One of the biggest downfalls of a 1031, though, is the timing restrictions and limitations. It might be a perfect time to sell,
Yes.
but not the best time to buy, not the best time to reinvest, or at least not in that same market. And so as to not be forced into the purchase of something that may not be a good fit, or it might not be the right price, we have the deferred sales trust that allows them to go and find those other assets, be them real estate, be them crypto, be them marketable securities, be them what they be. You're able to take the proceeds from one asset, roll that into the purchase of another asset, all under the shell of the deferred sales trust, and not recognize a taxable event, because you're all keeping it at arm's length. You're having a third-party trustee, unrelated party who administrates the assets, and of course you've got the brain surgeon type attorneys behind you to make sure that it's all done up correctly.
So I have a story about the 1031. I got a call from a friend of mine who said that he had a friend who was in a 1031 and was trying to figure out how to get out of it. And so I ended up calling this gentleman, and he owns a bunch of commercial real estate. He's coming up on his deadline, his 181 day deadline. And in fact, it's on Saturday. This is deadline. And they're not going to perform. They have $4 million in this exchange, and they owe $1.5 million in tax. So he, was frantically trying to figure out a way to get it, but he didn't get there in time. I don't think there's enough time for us to, save that failed 1031. We needed a little bit more time. And it's a shame because, a week ago, possible we could have done it. So I think that really speaks to the importance of getting in early and making sure that you're putting yourself with an accommodator that's going to give you options instead of just one who only wants the 1031 to go through. So yeah, that one hurt a little bit. because it was like, ooh, and I could just hear in his voice, like I called him yesterday, and you could just tell he gave up. He's just accepted the fact that he's pretty much gonna have to pay that tax. So
With that in mind, obviously trying to save a failed 1031, that's almost like an extension of time to make things happen right. When is the appropriate time to consider a deferred sales trust? When should an individual bring someone in to discuss and consult on whether it's an appropriate fit?
the second they have the thought of selling, right? That was your friend from last week or 2 weeks ago.
That's right.
Yeah, the second you have that thought, for sure.
I mean, absolutely getting in front of it. It's also very helpful when you're not changing last minute things in the contract for the buyer. You want everyone to be on board, understanding. You want everyone to have a chance to be educated and to learn what this can do for them. Give them the time to pull out the magnifying glass and take a good, deep, solid look at all the different moving parts and pieces so that they can feel comfortable with all the people involved, as well as who it is that's going to be their trustee, an unrelated third party, an individual who they've never met or done business with before, and make sure that it's all good. Get any other professionals involved that need to be involved, anybody else that's providing advice or has an influence or an impact on their decision, bring them all to the table and let's have the conversation. I've been in a boardroom with 27 people. It was a medical clinic. It was a clinic. That's kind of like small sounding, but it was a very expansive medical clinic. A lot of the doctors, physicians were also owners. So all the owners were in the room with all of their advisors and consultants and attorneys and everybody else. And we had a fantastic conversation all the way around the table, answering everybody's questions and going over the details so that those people that this did make sense for, as they were getting bought up by a bigger conglomerate, they could participate individually and they could make that choice. Which I guess I bring that up.
I think that's.
I was going to say that we welcome questions. We welcome people who have honest questions and or concerns, and we are willing to address them and give them the time that they need, as long as they bring the deal or the opportunity to us with enough time to explain it correctly.
I think that's one of the powerful things about the deferred sales trust as well, is that it gives people choice whether or not they want to do it independent of another person's decision. It doesn't get crushed when someone, a partner, a spouse, whatever, right, a syndication decides that they don't want to. One person can decide not to. If it's not right for them, the other person can decide to do it. It is right for them, and there's no bearing on one person's decisions on your ability to do it or not, which is not the case with the 1031.
Well, very good. Well, we're at the half-hour mark. I think it's time to open up for any questions from the panel, as well as, I don't know if I can monitor the Facebook feed from here. I don't think I can, but anybody here who's joined us on Zoom, feel free to ask any questions. Go ahead and unmute yourself. If you feel comfortable with it, show your camera, and let's give attention to any questions from the public at this moment.
Good, how are you?
All right, well, I might just pick on a few people here. I believe we have joining us from Kansas, of all places, we have the Newtons. We have Brian and Brennan Newton. Are you guys there? And you, Bao,
Yes, we are.
Pierce about got ran over by a bicycle there.
Wow. Happens.
So Brennan,
Lots of them.
You look awfully dapper today, Jay.
Yeah. Classy.
Sometimes
That's what I said.
But yes, help us know and understand your guys' experience with some of your clients that have done the deferred sales trust. Maybe just think of one of the individuals. You don't have to talk about them by name or anything like that, but talk about the deal. And say again.
Yeah.
Oh, we were just discussing which one, like, 'cause we've done a handful with you and with Brett Schwartz, and like, they've all been like really, really good experiences and really good for the client situation. And so I think the last one we did, we can go over that briefly. But yeah, we had a client that they were selling their house. They were going to have, a sizable gain in it.
Yeah, it was a rental property.
Yep. So it's a rental that they were selling while the market was still up. They're like, hey, let's go ahead and capture this. They decided to do it. But we didn't hear about it and know about it quick enough to actually do deferred sales trust initially. So we had to do a 1031, which we were set up, with Brett, with someone that's familiar with the deferred sales trust. So they started with the 1031 in case there was real estate they could get into. They decided they couldn't. And so then we were able to move that 1031 over to the deferred sales trust. But for them, they're also retired. And so they're going to be able to just take out every single year enough to still not have to pay any taxes on any of those.
Yeah, so they're in that kind of sweet spot where they're retired, but they're early before they can actually even take out of their qualified accounts without penalty. So they're just kind of living on previous money that they've had. So they have almost no taxable income right now. So they're going to be able to use the deferred sales trust literally as a installment sale type of transaction, to where they can basically take the money out over the next 5 years and actually bypass and stay under that 0% capital gains tax threshold. So they're actually going to be able to not just defer it, but also eliminate probably $20,000 to $30,000 of taxes, which is pretty cool.
So
After the fee.
If we paint the picture a little bit more with some estimated numbers, just really fast, instead of 20% capital gains, 3.8% Obama tax, state taxes on top of that, you are able to structure it into the deferred sales trust and still pay it out, not exceeding that 79,000 whatever number, qualify for the 0% capital gains tax rate.
Yep, bingo.
Yep. For the next kind of 5 years, they'll take that money out, use it, live on it, rather than have to take it from somewhere else, and rather than ever capturing that gain on the sale of that house. So, I mean, I think it's
Perfect.
pretty much exactly what the deferred sales trust is designed for. But,
Yeah.
if you like paying taxes, then I guess it's a terrible strategy.
Yeah. And then also, also works great for the bigger ones, where you can you sell appreciated asset and you defer it and use those assets to grow it. Also works really well. But this was one of those situations that just kind of everything aligned to where they could actually stay under the 0% capital gains threshold.
Yeah.
Which nobody ever stays under that.
Yeah. And then everyone from, Brett Schwartz and you and, the attorneys, like everyone was really good with us and navigating hey, you use this person for the 1031. Like, so we didn't have to do a whole lot except for our job, which is planning and, managing the money. And so it worked. It was actually pretty seamless for something that could have been pretty messy.
Yep.
So
Absolutely. It worked out great.
A good time.
Well, and I think the importance here is that we're able to see that it is able to be customized. The deferred sales trust is able to be customized to the needs within certain parameters, right? To the specific needs of somebody's specific scenario and deal. It's not a one size shoe fits all. It's actually built for that person's foot, so to speak, in the sense that your clients wanted to have a spend down plan that was optimized and more efficient than just paying the taxes now. In fact, they're avoiding almost all of the taxes everywhere, and it's fantastic. Some of your other clients, as you mentioned, and some of the clients we talked about previously here, they are a little bit more of I want to continue to grow, but I want to grow with my assets outside of my estate. So some of them are more concerned about not only income taxes or capital gains taxes or Obama taxes, they're concerned with the death tax. or the estate tax. Here coming at the end of 2026, we have the sunset of Trump's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, right? When that happens, the exclusion for the death tax or the estate tax, meaning in order to pass my stuff on to the next generation, if it exceeds right now, married filing joint, 24 million, which is a significant number, but as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act sunsets, it resets to what it was before, which is half of that roughly. A lot of individuals who have larger estates and have larger things going on, that's going to make a big deal because, but what is that terrible tax rate for the estate tax or death tax? Anybody? I'll just tell you, it's 40%. So if you thought 20% capital gains tax rate was a big one, or if you thought that the state of California income tax rate at the highest level, 13.3, is a big one, or if you thought that the federal, income tax rate at the highest level, 37% was a big one, well, we've got a bigger one, and that's the death tax. That's when you try to pass assets on to the next generation. If you don't use any other tools or instruments to help offset that burden, then you have to chop up your assets and pay the piper or Uncle Sam and the state that we live in.
Jake,
yes, go ahead.
Can we park here for a second and dive into this a little bit?
Go ahead.
So, when is that law, or when is that threshold going to be reduced? Is there a specific year?
So the threshold changes when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act sunsets or ends, and that's in 2026.
Okay. So if let's say, what are some of the other ways that people can kind of get around that 40% death tax? Let's say let's say they're worth $100 million, right? So they're 75 million or so over that threshold. How are they currently doing it? And I'm trying to draw comparisons between their blockbuster way, right, of doing things and this other way, right, the deferred sales trust 2.0. So can we dive into that for a minute?
Right. We can. Now, a lot of times they're not avoiding it. They're just finding alternative methods or ways of paying for it. Oftentimes, the most common and the most successful, or the cheapest, if you haven't done other planning earlier on, which I think is where you're going with this, the cheapest oftentimes is through life insurance, because you can pay a small monthly or annual premium. You can get a really big death benefit that can go towards paying that 40% death tax. And it's one of the only ways that you can actually have an exact amount determined through the life insurance illustrations. However, to your point, Pierce, they may not need such a really big policy if through proper structuring, they were buying and selling these assets through a deferred sales trust and removing them from their estate as time is going on, essentially freezing at that moment in time through the promissory note what remains in their estate while moving assets outside for reinvestment purposes in the deferred sales trust outside of their estate and allowing them to continue to grow outside of their estate, of which the next generation can take on management control of those assets to a certain degree with the proper use and management of the deferred sales trust. And in that scenario, say 75, we have the 100 million in assets total, right? We exempt the first 24 or so. The remainder of those assets, if over time we were removing them from our estate and building them over here in this site, in this trust, the actual needs upon death for the death benefit itself can be more catered towards the family and less towards the assets and ensuring that the assets can move on to the family in the next generation, because we've already done that prior to death.
So typically how people are really doing it now is they're buying life insurance policies with big death benefits. And are they paying a really big premium into it initially? and then they're getting distributions, or are they able to use it as like their infinite banking strategy and stuff like that?
That depends. There's a lot of different policies for a lot of different purposes, and this does not get rid of the need for life insurance. However, it allows for you to focus the life insurance on other purposes and goals, like what you mentioned, being able to live off of the cash value, being able to pull and borrow from these policies during your life, rather than focusing the policy solely on the death benefit to pay for that 40% haircut at death. And so it does allow, I oftentimes tell people that in the overall planning of what we have going on, and a client may have several taxable transactions over the course of their life, very much entrepreneurs and real estate investors, people of this nature, deferred sales trust can help them accomplish a lot of those transactions more efficiently. And when used correctly, the deferred sales trust becomes a little bit of a keystone strategy product. A keystone strategy product that then allows for a lot of these other products to be optimized in other ways. So instead of tailoring a life insurance policy, which most people have more than one, by the way, but tailoring it solely for the largest death benefit possible to help pay for that death tax, you could tailor it for cash value accumulation. You could tailor it for succession planning within a business. You could tailor it for a lot of these other needs and uses, and it's not going to be solely exhausted because of the death tax need.
So let's say someone doesn't plan, right? They just hit it big. They made, $100 million, and then they passed it along to their heirs. Are you saying that their heirs, if it's in real estate, are going to have to sell off the real estate in order to pay that tax?
So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about an IT company. This is a real life scenario.
Okay.
All right. This is a $40 million IT company. And they're trying to figure out what to do. The family is right now. They're trying to figure out what to do with the company because mom and dad are sick and they're not going to be around for a long time.
Okay.
In this scenario, should they pass away, in order to just normally, naturally pass the assets on to their heirs, there's an exemption, again, on the first 24 million should they pass away before 2026, right? Which isn't that just kind of like a scary thing? Like, hey, my parents might not be doing very well, but, New Year's Eve of 2026, or, when the reset happens and we're going to lose half of that exemption, I mean, you can just imagine people having a hard decision. Hey, do I unplug mom and dad right now?
Yeah.
Because it could be a
rough.
$12 million decision, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I digress. They're trying to make the decision on what to do because they have a $40 million IT company and 24 million of it right now could be an exemption. The rest of it is subject to a 40% tax. Should it just be passed on naturally to their kids? And they're not in a position where they can go back in time and start moving things into a deferred sales trust. So they're trying to decide, should I sell? And if they do, then, they're going to have, if they use the deferred sales trust now, they're going to have a promissory note for the 40 million, and that still stays in their estate. And so, yes, in your scenario, in your example, if it were just real estate, a lot of times we think, hey, we can pass all of our real estate. There's going to be a step up in basis. A lot of good things are going to happen here until we get to the point where there's that death tax. Once we supersede those exclusions and get up into the realm of a value that is above and beyond what can be offset, then we have to start considering ways and methods to pay. And a lot of times, peers, if people are not ready or not prepared, it ends up being a fire sale, because the IRS will take the fair market value or an appraised value of the asset. But if there's not a market for it, case in point, there was a farm in Texas. These people were dirt rich and money poor.
Okay.
Mom and dad passed away. the requirement is that the estate tax gets paid within like 9 months.
Yikes.
You can't always find an appropriate buyer in 9 months for a farm of that size in the state of Texas. Maybe now, right? But like in this scenario, they had to sell at a huge steep discount, a fire sale, to sell the family farm and everything else. And the proceeds, well, the tax bill was still the same. The tax bill was still had to be paid on the appraised value. So even though they sold it for less than appraisal, because they had to find somebody that would provide them with liquidity so that they could pay the tax man, they ended up pretty much losing everything on the farm. I mean, think of it this way. These are not the exact numbers, but if it were a 50% discount that they sold it for, and there's a 40% tax, they end up with 10% of the actual value of the farm. Anyway, it was a pretty sad scenario. So
Yeah,
that's why finding alternative methods to pay for it is kind of incredibly important, and or structuring through this deferred sales trust. If there's going to be a number of transactions over time, let's slowly but surely be using the deferred sales trust to move these assets so they can continue to grow in other investments, but be moving them outside of an individual's estate.
I want to go back to this idea that you said that with the IT company really quick, and you said that even if they did a deferred sales trust, they would not be able to move the assets outside of a taxable estate.
Well, the assets, yes, but there's an exchange prior to the day of the sale or on the day of the sale. There's a pre-wash sale. An individual, when we use a deferred sales trust, we put the trust in between them and the buyer.
Yep.
And based on the sales price, we do a promissory note exchange for the asset into the trust, so that it can be the trust that sells it to the buyer. Well, that promissory note of same value is what stays in that person's estate. And now,
Gotcha.
this is an overtime strategy to get assets out, right? So what can they do now? Well, they've got the $40 million promissory note in their estate. They have the proceeds of it in the deferred sales trust. And ideally, they take those proceeds and they continue to go and invest, right? And as they continue to invest and that grows, the promissory note stays relatively the same with the interest rate and everything else, right? But it is quite likely and very possible that they're able to grow what's in the deferred sales trust to something greater. And that's the advantage of moving it out. We've frozen in time, roughly, the value that stays in the estate, and we allow it to continue to grow elsewhere in the deferred sales trust.
Could they not use a DST 2.0 or DST Plus?
That is the DST 2.0. That is that version.
Okay.
Yeah.
So their promissory note's going to stay within their estate, but the proceeds are moved outside. So how is that? It's just because they are running out of time that they can't move things over quickly enough?
Well, yes, because this would work earlier on for like real estate people who are planning to buy and sell and buy and sell and buy and sell and buy and sell, or a serial entrepreneur who has several different businesses going, and they build them up for a period of time. They make them very profitable. They sell them and then they do it again and again and again. They are, every single time that they use the deferred sales trust, freezing that amount in a new promissory note that gets frozen in their estate, so to speak. All the growth thereafter can happen inside of the deferred sales trust. And that's the power and the magic. Again, it's not one trick pony, so to speak. It doesn't solve all the problems for everybody all at once, and it doesn't remove the need for life insurance in scenarios like this for the IT company as well.
So then the strategy for this particular would be to sell the asset. Now, could they sell it to their children?
That's a possibility. However, the deferred sales trust allows for some legacy planning. It allows for the children in the version 2.0 to become, through the family trust, to become the next beneficiaries or heirs of those assets, or the next creditors who are the owners of the promissory note. That's already kind of built into the deferred sales trust.
Gotcha. But they do have to kind of get rid of the company. There's no way to keep the company and keep it outside of that taxable estate.
Well, there is the exclusion amount, the first 24 million or so. The remainder is subject to that 40% tax. They may have to just take a taxable distribution from the deferred sales trust to pay that tax.
Gotcha.
And it's the death tax on the promissory note that they have against the assets of the trust. Now, fortunately, I believe they do have life insurance, so they won't have to liquidate the assets in the trust. Should they use the proceeds from the life insurance policies to pay that death tax. Now,
Interesting.
in other people's scenarios where they're able to sell a business prior to coming upon death, etc., you have more time to where you've got a limited amount of death tax over here because you've been planning appropriately, and you've got a lot more assets that have been moved over and are not subject to that death tax in the deferred sales trust.
I think I'm kind of hung up on the promissory note stays within the taxable estate, but you can move assets outside the taxable estate. So how does that jive?
All right, let's place an example. Multifamily home.
Okay.
We're going to sell a multifamily complex. We are going to sell it for $10 million.
Okay.
Prior to the date of the sale, we're going to do an exchange, a promissory note to the owners of the multifamily. Now, the promissory note is in their estate. The multifamily is now in the trust. The trust then sells the multifamily units.
Yep.
So we have moved the asset out.
Okay.
The value, the fair market value of that asset is still in the estate in the form of the promissory note. There's a big IOU.
Right.
The asset that was moved into the trust is sold, and now there's money there. We're going to take that money and we're going to help them reinvest it. So it's not the promissory note that's growing. The promissory note that is inside of their estate, which has an interest rate, right? But the overall balance, the principal is not growing because of any continued business operations. We've moved the assets out. We exchanged them for cash. We are now going to reinvest the cash in, let's say, more multifamily. If we invest in more multifamily, there's the chance and possibility that there's income from the doors and that there's appreciation from the new multifamily unit. So we moved 10 million into the trust. We sold the 10 million of real estate. We have 10 million promissory note that stays a 10 million promissory note over here on the side of the family. The money that we went and bought another multifamily with, we get an appraisal, let's say 2-3 years later. And it has grown because of income, and it has grown because of appreciation. It's now worth 12 million.
Okay.
So now we have 12 million outside of the estate. We only
Gotcha.
have 10 million that's left in the estate. 10 million promissory note, and the asset continues to grow over here to 12 million. And you can see that over time, especially if we do this again and again and again with other cells, that we're able to freeze in time because of the promissory note, the value. And then as things appreciate, as things grow, as you know, if it's marketable securities, if it's crypto, if it's your business, other business, all of that can grow over here in the deferred sales trust.
So it's not so much that the actual assets are moved out, the value of your current portfolio stays the same. What we're doing is we're freezing it and we're growing it outside of the taxable estate, so that nothing that we have that is inside the taxable estate is going to continue to rise. But we're still going to have to figure out how to pay the death tax if we're over that 22 million, or in 2026 that gets cut in half to 12. So
yes, based on what's in the family estate, well, Piers, I think you're cutting up quite a bit. We need to send a solar flare over there to California so that you have better cell phone reception. You cut up on that.
Yeah. Sorry. So I was just saying, so it's not that we're freezing, it's not that we're eliminating the death tax for the current amount of wealth that they have. If they're at 25 million, they're at 25 million, but we're going to freeze it here and we're going to grow outside of that taxable estate.
That is correct. Yes. So
But then you-
we've moved a portfolio of assets outside of the estate, and we're able to change that portfolio as we go. Normally assets, as you change them from one asset to another, that's a taxable event. That's a sale. And with the deferred sales trust, we're able to defer the recognition of that sale going forward and continue to reinvest those assets and continue to make them grow. And in the DST 2.0, that all happens outside of your estate. Now, Pierce, we are running out of time.
We are.
We are up at the top of the hour, and that was a fantastic dialogue that we had in regards to estate planning and the DST. If people want to reach you, Pierce, to know more about the Deferred Sales Trust or luxury real estate, how can they reach you?
Yeah, you can go to kingdomluxuryrealty.com.
kingdomluxuryrealty.com. Very good. And if people would like to reach out to myself, they can go to strategictaxsolutions.com, as well as an 800 number. Again, strategictaxsolutions.com or 1-800-773-1848. And of course, if you'd like to watch a replay of this video, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, where you'll see Brett Swartz. You will be able to also book a call with him as well. And I would like to thank everyone for coming in today. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. And for any and all your questions about today's episode or any of the other episodes, feel free to reach out and we'll be in contact, we'll be in touch, or join us for next week's call. We're here same time, same place. Thank you, everyone.